Hey there, everybody. It's Rick Uzzi. This is Tech Tuesday. I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me for Tech Tuesday. I hope you're doing well today. Today I'm going to be talking about just some broadband news, just some updates on that, some of the things that are going on in the industry that have been happening recently. There's no way to get away from COVID-19 coronavirus. So there'll be some news about that, but also I'm going to try to cover some other things that are going on right now. If you're joining me, feel free to chat, say hello, ask any questions you might have. But today just covering some broadband news. So let's see what's happening. First off, if you have heard about Connect America Fund or called CAF2, Connect America Phase 2, there are some requirements for those that have taken money under that program from the FCC to be able to test for speed and latency on the networks that they've deployed taking that money, and that's been pushed out. That's been pushed out a little bit. It was supposed to be already taking place as far as the testing that was required, and that was pushed out to give people more time to do that, since that was just a mandate of the program. And just the FCC recently announced that they have also went ahead and basically they're giving carriers a break a bit on they still have to do the reporting, but basically what happened was they said this reporting had to be done, then they pushed it out, and some carriers have said, well, you know, before you told us what we needed to do, we already put into place some testing plans, and we're not going to be ready for your new requirements. I don't know how much of this has to do with COVID-19. It may be that some of it does, that the FCC did this because who right now would be focusing on that, especially if you're a broadband operator, as you can imagine. You wouldn't be thinking so much about your testing of, you know, to get reports back into the FCC. You're more interested in making sure that all of your subscribers are able to get access right now and making sure that they have the speed that they need without having to do all that testing because of everybody at home. So it's possible that's the reason that the FCC did this. But so basically what they said is they still got to do the testing, but they said you can go ahead and do the testing under the plan that you have, and then you can make some assumptions based on your testing, and that will be okay. So an assumption, for example, might be you have to test during a certain time, and if you just have a start date, a start time, and not the end time, that's fine. You can assume how long that end time will be if your particular system doesn't report that. So they're allowing them some things. Now, if they're going to take advantage of this, they need to go ahead and make sure they get this pre-approved with the FCC. But the FCC said that's okay, that you can do that with your current testing parameters as long as they meet the basic requirements of the testing. And if you're going to take any more money from us, then you need to make sure that you have everything else in place, is really how they're finishing that up. So that's just something for those that have taken CAF2 money. This is a little story about Frontier prepping for bankruptcy. So, and they're citing dependency on DSL as a core factor. So as you can imagine, DSL is not the leading edge technology it once was. So, you know, you've got DOCSIS out there, you've got DOCSIS 3.1, you've got some of the 10G stuff, DOCSIS 4.0, and some of the 10G stuff in DOCSIS that's coming out. That's keeping DOCSIS and cable operators kind of on the leading edge there, ahead of the curve of what people need. And of course, you've had fiber out there, same thing. There's fiber technology very fast, and you know, there's advancements in fiber as well, but there's not much happening with DSL. So you can see here that over half its revenues come from residential services, and most of those customers are DSL customers. They've got 11 million passed, and 65% of those homes can only get speeds of 24 megabits per second or less. That seems pretty fast these days, or excuse me, it seems pretty fast old days, but these days not so much. They've got 2.6 million residential broadband subscribers. That's penetrating about 21%, but over half, 53%, subscribe to that slow DSL service that they have. So that's really the issue that they have. Their stock's currently at 36 cents per share, so sounds like some stocks I've owned in the past that have kind of tanked at various times, and this one has done that. And but they're looking at, you know, they want to emerge from this in a better position, so they'll file for bankruptcy and then want to emerge from that. And then what they're saying is they're putting together plans that will start to rely more on fiber. They're saying 47% of its revenues coming from fiber-based networks by 2024, and then 66% by 2031. So fiber currently represents 34% of its revenue. Let's see. AT&T stopped selling Uverse. So this was expected as well. AT&T's been hinting at this for a long, long time. They actually were pointing people toward DirecTV. So they kind of stopped selling Uverse in a lot of places and started pointing people toward DirecTV. And then now I think they're pointing people toward their new AT&T TV. At one point they were calling their over-the-top service DirecTV Now. And it was something where I don't think you needed a little set-top box. It was just like an offering that they had where you could get most of the content that was on DirecTV over the top. But now they're actually selling it at something called AT&T TV Now, or AT&T TV, excuse me. And now that service, there'll be a little Android-based set-top box, and you'll get the service over the top from them. It's not really related to DirecTV Now. And I think at some point DirecTV is basically going to be going away too, because this can hit anywhere where somebody's got a good internet connection. Obviously, you've still got some issues, and the reason they have DirecTV service is for those people that are not in a position maybe to get good broadband service, and they maybe don't have cable TV. So it's an option for people that need pay TV. In the future, though, with satellite and with what SpaceX is doing with Starlink, it's going to be difficult. I think they're going to be taking over the satellite stuff, and people will be able to probably get TV over that service as well as broadband. I guess we'll have to see about that. So, and it's expensive. So DirecTV, trying to maintain satellites and all of that. I think AT&T bought this to be able to eventually transition the way that they were doing TV, and they're in the process of doing that right now. So speaking of satellite TV, Dish is cutting jobs, and they're saying that coronavirus is impacting the business, and I'm sure it's impacting their business just like it is everybody else, but I suspect that's more of an excuse than anything else, I would think. They say the ongoing pandemic has negatively impacted its business, and it's obviously impacted lots of businesses as far as, same for cable operators, telcos, maybe having to trim back on the in-home visits, so it might be a little harder to get customers set up and to maintain them. But what they've said is the pandemic has forced us to take a closer look at every aspect of our business, at our work, volumes, our areas of focus and investments, and the performance of our team members. So, but I think some of what they're saying here is also was going to happen anyway. So during the most recent quarter, Dish reported a total net paid TV subscriber loss of approximately 194,000 subscribers. So that included their first ever quarterly subscriber decline for Sling TV. Now, was that related to COVID-19? Probably not. It says here the decrease in Sling is primarily related to increased competition. Of course, you've got, since Sling has come out, you've had YouTube TV come out, now you've got Disney Plus out, so there's all kinds of streaming options for people. So that would explain some loss there as well. And here it says Dish was an integral factor in T-Mobile's recently completed acquisition of Sprint. And that's true because with that acquisition, T-Mobile will be providing some resources that will allow Dish to become a new mobile provider. So, and as part of this also, so Dish was there to provide T-Mobile with some spectrum for this COVID-19 coronavirus crisis thing here, so that T-Mobile could get more spectrum. And they got a lot of that spectrum from Dish and a few others. So it says by March 18th, this was 4 days after getting the spectrum, T-Mobile had deployed an additional 600 megahertz in 76 of its top 100 CMAs. So that's pretty amazing. And then 85 markets in just 10 days later, and that increased the bandwidth from 2.6 times, or by 2.6 times, according to this story. So they were able to get a lot of additional spectrum from Dish. They were able to increase speeds. And let's see here, when connected to the 600 megahertz band, the average download speeds also rose from 9.9 megabits per second at the beginning of March to 20.2 by the end of March. So they've really been able to increase their speeds, and a lot of that was provided by Dish because they had already been working with Dish in a sense for this merger. And more news is that T-Mobile did finally close this merger. And that was a long process. They had lawsuits, had to deal with the FCC, then they had lawsuits they had to get through. So that is now done for the most part. They announced they've closed that deal and are starting to combine the T-Mobile and the Sprint operations, and that will make them the third and fourth, or actually they're combining the third and the fourth largest U.S. providers. So that will give an opportunity to compete more effectively with Verizon, AT&T. And then again, because of that, that's going to allow Dish. Dish has been acquiring lots of spectrum, which, as I mentioned, they just had loaned to T-Mobile for this period of time. So they've been acquiring the spectrum in the hopes and in the process of getting into the wireless business, which will help them kind of exit this satellite business. So they've been doing that. So they're now set up to do that. And the one thing that's missing is they've not gotten the final approval from the California Public Utilities. And they're saying here that that's probably, this particular story said that was probably not going to be an issue, but some are saying T-Mobile took a risk by this, by not finishing it with that California approval, because the California agency is saying you can't do this until we approve it. So they're wanting their final say, even though it's really all but a done deal. So they are scheduled to vote on that on April 16th. But they issued a ruling saying that they shall not begin the merger of their California operations until after they've issued that final decision. So they, like I say, they want their final say. And again, T-Mobile's had to go through these lawsuits, and including one from California, but they won that. And they won over the FCC, so it's really all but done. And they're claiming that some of the conditions that the CPUC wants to put on this are going to be unfair, and it's going to be really unfair against them, and it's going to be a benefit to their competitors. So I expect that the agency will vote for that, and even if they don't, I don't think it's going to prevent T-Mobile from moving forward with that merger. So some COVID-19 news. The broadband usage has started to plateau according to OpenVault, which is OpenVault's company that provides bandwidth usage management. So they're seeing a lot of the bandwidth that's being used regularly from the customers that they have connected to their platform. So it says after 3 weeks of double-digit percentage growth, the total downstream data usage in markets with shelter-at-home policies declined by almost 10% or 6% during March 30th through April 3rd when compared to the previous week. So as we knew was going to happen, as we saw, the bandwidth usage spiked as more and more people started working from home, and it's kind of started to level off now as people get into their new routines that they're doing for work and for school during the day. And maybe some of that decline has to do with the fact that a lot of schools have said, you know what, we're done. So even though schools would still be in now, there are lots of school systems that have said, you know what, we're done for the year. There's not anything else we're going to do. So kids are maybe outside playing as they should be instead of inside doing school. I guess they should be doing school this time of year, but you know what I mean. So they said the average downstream consumption during the 9 to 5 p.m. business hours in the last week was 6.35 gigabits, 42.46% higher than the January level of 4.46 gigabits per second, so, or gigabytes. That's big gigabytes. So you can see the big increase there. And as it says here, that prior to the pandemic, peak usage would generally be when people got home, and you had parents getting home, you had the kids home, and everybody started getting on the internet and doing things. And now that's kind of spread out. We've flattened the curve of broadband usage over the day, as opposed to a big peak that would happen at prime time. So, and this is true that we're seeing it go down, but there may be areas that have not instituted kind of shelter-in-place lockdown kind of orders in some parts of the country because they just are not seeing the virus. So it could be that as they institute those policies, that more people will be getting going home, and they'll start to see some bump up in usage there as well. Although we are now entering the spring and summer months. We're now into spring. It's really, in Georgia here, it's cooler today, but there's been several warm days. So I think we're going to start to see this virus do what normal viruses would do during this time of the year, which would be it'll start to recede on its own anyway. So those areas that may have missed the big peak may not quite get there now. They may get to it later in the fall if this thing comes back. Most likely will come back and they may get to it then, but for right now they may have missed the peak. So 5G rollout advances despite pandemic, but hazards loom. So 5G is still moving forward, and there's some question as to whether the pandemic will impact that. Here the former federal or FCC official Blair Levin said, concerns about construction crew members working close to each other, disruptions to supply chains, and consumers' ability and willingness to pay for pricey 5G plans and new phones amid staggering unemployment rates. So that's true. So there is always this question, the longer that this, that the kind of the country in a sense remains closed, and you've got a lot of people out there that are unemployed right now, will there start to be an impact on, do they start cutting back on their broadband services? Do they, they're going to maybe put off buying things like a new phone, a 5G phone? And those 5G phones are expensive anyway, so there's not really a good reason to buy one right now. If you go with T-Mobile and their nationwide 5G, you're not going to really get much faster than their 4G service. If you're in an area where you happen to have millimeter wave, then it would make sense because you could get really fast service if you're outside, where you have, your device has access line of sight to an antenna. You can get really, really fast service. It might be worthwhile there. But they're a lot more expensive, the 5G phones that are out now. And I think it's probably more related to the fact that they're new than the technology that's needed in there. So the carriers are saying it's not impacting them. They're moving ahead. AT&T, they're identified as essential as far as their workers. So their workers are out doing what they need to do. And their plan is on track. And then T-Mobile and Verizon said that they're moving ahead with their plans as well. So it seems like it's not going to impact that. So the virus from that perspective is not having an impact now. It's interesting, there is an impact. Over in Britain, there are some 5G towers that were set on fire because of coronavirus conspiracy theories. People are thinking that 5G is the cause of coronavirus. Some of that's coming from, I think, the fact that 5G was implemented in Wuhan, China, and then of course that's where the virus came from. Coincidence? Yes, it is. Just like, here in this country, you've got certain urban areas where the very fast 5G has been implemented because that's where, because of 5G, you've got small cells, and it's got to be line of sight. So the cell towers have to be very close to each other, and then you need line of sight to the device. So it tends to be implemented right now by Verizon primarily in urban areas. So, and it just so happens that urban areas is where a virus is going to spread the fastest. So people are making a connection there. Some conspiracy theories that are not too smart. So people have been setting these masts on fire. And let's see, Vodafone UK spokesman confirmed 4 cell towers were targeted in the past 24 hours. That was a few days ago, I think. And police are investigating. At least one tower in Birmingham doesn't even provide 5G services, but was still set on fire. So I'm assuming the people that are lighting these things on fire don't actually know whether or not they provide 5G service. So they're just out lighting towers on fire. So I don't think we've seen that in the US, but apparently in England it's happening. And the whole 5G bad for your health thing has been around a while. It's not anything new. The coronavirus scientists came out and they said it's complete rubbish. It's the 5G conspiracy theory as far as coronavirus. But what people are thinking is the conspiracy or the misunderstanding what's happening is one theory is that the 5G can suppress the immune system. So as you're being bombarded, I guess, with 5G waves, it makes people more susceptible to catching the virus, which is why maybe, again, they see urban areas, lots of people getting it. That's where you've got 5G cell towers. So the two must be connected. And the other suggests that somehow it's being transmitted by the 5G technology, which is even further out there. So the virus somehow gets transmitted via 5G, and that's obviously rubbish, as this British doctor said. It's complete rubbish. Oh, and there's there's a little. Oh yeah, so and it's true that 5G radio waves can heat up your body, microwaves, right? If you put something in the microwave oven, it heats up the food, and radio waves can heat up your body, but it says nowhere near strong enough to heat people as far as 5G. It's still disconcerting though to think about radio waves being able to heat up your body. It can disrupt your physiology. We know this from different kinds of waves, but they're saying 5G waves aren't nearly strong enough. You can see here where things fall, and actually 5G is somewhere in here. In fact, I've got a picture of that, a better picture of that. So these are the radiation waves on the electromagnetic spectrum, and you've got everything from a computer all the way up to gamma rays. These are obviously very deadly. And then, interestingly enough, you've got visible light in here. So everything past visible light they call ionizing radiation, and this is the stuff that can cause issues, that can damage your DNA. Down here, you've got a microwave oven, and as far as 5G, it's going to live somewhere right about here to right about here. So 5G, what T-Mobile is rolling out, kind of low-band 5G spectrum that's not really much faster than 4G, is in like the 700 megahertz spectrum range, and they're going to be rolling out mid-band spectrum soon, and that's going to be I think in the like 2 to 3 gigahertz range spectrum. So that's going to be in the range of, let's say, here. Verizon, who's rolling out millimeter wave spectrum, they're in the 30 to 40 gigahertz range. So they're somewhere around here. So you can see all this is well below visible light. So thankfully, just standing under a light, hopefully you're not getting any more radiation than that as far as damage goes. And then of course, once you get past this, you've got UV rays, so don't get in a tanning bed. X-rays, so we want to be real careful about how many X-rays we get over our lives, and of course, hopefully, gamma rays. You're not ever around any of those. So this is where it gets really bad. But down here, they don't think there's any issues. I know people that still worry about microwave ovens, and leakage from that, but that's also well below visible light. So. And then finally, again, more COVID-19 news. So it's been enough in the news where SCTE, which has got their trade show coming up in October 13th through the 16th, they've actually added a track for dealing with this pandemic. It'll be over by then, I hope, although again, it could come back at that point. Maybe in the fall it starts to come back. But they're going to have various things. You can see here some of the things that they're going to have in that track. Future pandemics with a 10G network. And of course, a lot of people are dealing with, how their NOCs are handling things, maintaining workforce's focus on network performance during a crisis. I talked about a lot of this the last couple of weeks. I talked about diagnostics products that you can use during a pandemic if you've got remote workers, and doing some proactive network maintenance, using a P&M tool if you've got remote workers in your cable provider. I talked about, just in general, some of the stats and the amount of bandwidth that's come up. So these are things that they're going to be covering in that new track coming up in October for the SCTE. Hey there, Rick Inger. How are you? I hope you're doing well. Happy Tuesday. And actually, I'm glad Rick popped on here, because my plan for next week is to have Rick on. Actually, our plan is to talk about deploying fiber when you're a cable operator and you want to deploy fiber. They've been through that. So Rick is with Highlands Cable up in North Carolina, and we'll be chatting next week. And he's going to talk a little bit about what they've done to be able to deploy fiber, which they're mostly doing in, I think, primarily at this point, doing in all greenfield kinds of areas, but there'll be some good advice if you're a cable operator and wondering, how do I get started, what do I do, and what are some of the best ways to do that, best practices for that. So I'll be talking to Rick about that next Tuesday. I hope this was interesting for you. If so, just give us a like on the video. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, go ahead and click the subscribe button on YouTube, and then ring the little bell next to that, and you'll be notified anytime we're live. So that's it. Lots going on. A lot of it's still COVID-19 related, but at some point in the future, there'll be less focus on that. But things are still moving along. in the broadband world, regardless of the pandemic. We're still doing what we need to do. So I will be back next week with Rick Yinger from Highlands Cable, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.